and still have plenty to go. But today we thought we'd do something a little bit different because today is a special day in Bucks history, which is still hard to fathom that in late July is when the Bucks won their championship. Yes, July 20th, 2021, 2 years ago from today is when the Bucks won that championship right here in Milwaukee. Bucks in 6 came to fruition. Gabe Neitzel, Eric Nehm, to look back at that game 6 in what we're calling ReBuckables. And it is still super crazy to me as someone who lived the season. Obviously, the Buck season didn't go as long as we wanted it to this year. Or, I don't know about you, but as a fan, It did not go as long as I wanted it to. But you've already done draft stuff. You've been to Vegas and back for the summer league. So still in the finals at this point.
I mean, I think one of the cool things for Bucks fans is always going to be the fact that no one else has ever won a title at this time. And barring another worldwide pandemic, which could happen, I'm not saying it could.
Crossing my fingers.
It could happen. There's probably never going to be another team that gets to celebrate everything on July 20th. Like, this will be the day forever. And as you're recapping on this date in history, the only things happening right now, Milwaukee Bucks basketball. Like, it's baseball, and then all these cool things that the Bucks did during this time. And it's just turned into a super interesting title for Bucks fans because there's never anything else to think about this time of year. It's literally just, oh yeah, blank years ago, in this case 2 years ago, the Bucks won a championship, and they're the only team to ever win a championship around this time of year.
So watching this back for me, I still had it on my DVR, by the way, because that's how much of a nerd fan I am. So I still had it on the DVR. I'm sure you just used your
hop on Synergy. Yeah.
You've got your different ways. The first thing, it's still incredibly jarring to me to see the number of people that were outside of Fiserv Forum. Like it pretty much opens, they do the whatever inside the arena with Van Gundy and Jackson and Breen. And then they just immediately go to the outside of Fiserv Forum shots. And it's inside Fiserv Forum. It's in the empty lot which doesn't exist anymore. Right. There's the hotel and the parking and all that, everything in that lot. And then the lot where the Bradley Center used to be, just those three things, 65,000 people hoping to. You don't think it was that high?
I think it was higher.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you think?
I think it was higher.
So they did make a joke when they showed it later in the broadcast. I think it was Van Gundy who made a Dr. Fauci joke. Yep. Dr. Fauci's crazy. So you think it was higher than 65,000 people?
I do. I think that's what they needed to say to please the fire marshals, but I think there was more out there. It really is one of the very distinct memories I have of that night is the game's getting ready to go. I'm trying to make sure that, all right, if they win, I have a championship story prepped. If they lose, I have a preview of game 7 story prepped. You're thinking through all this stuff. And then our national writer, Sam Amick, was like, dude, you got to go walk around on the suite level. And the press level is on the suite level. So I'm walking around the suite level, and Fiserv Forum has those big glass windows, and you're walking around the south side, and there's a glob of people over there. And then you're walking over here on the other side, and there's a big glob of people. And then you make your way around the other side of the building, and there's a big glob of people. It's impossible that all three of those sections all the way around the arena are filled up. It is just this massive mob of people. And it's something I will truly never forget is those 10 minutes walking around the suite level and just trying to comprehend how many people are fit into these, 6-7 city blocks.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
As someone, and I know you like to get to the game, you get to any games early because you want to see what's going on in the arena, see if, if Giannis and Chris and all those guys, if anything's different about their warm-up routines, you want to be able to catch those things as a reporter. How early did you get to the arena that night, and how crazy was it trying to get into the arena even that early?
I mean, there were people out there already. And this,
so how many hours before tip-off?
I mean, I think I had to be there 5 hours early, probably. And there were people there, and it was just this is nothing any of us have ever seen, and are ever going to see again. Like, this is truly just unbelievable stuff. It is an absolute scene. And I know there are a lot of places that, you can say the same thing about, like Jurassic Park when the Raptors were doing their thing. I was there, like, for the Eastern Conference Finals. And again, it could have been a bigger crowd for the finals and everything. But, man, I just can't imagine a place where it's set up like that, where there's empty lots.
Yeah,
that are
the Bucks couldn't do it again.
Right, because things are going to be developed and things are going to be filled up. Like, because of what they were doing in the process of building the arena and in the process of building up the Deer District around it, they had empty lots to stuff people. Like, most arenas are going to have, just a certain amount of space around it. You're not going to have all this open, empty space. And it was just crazy.
Well, and that's the other, I think it was a perfect storm of because I remember then, in the years that have followed in the Deer District, like it was a very sad Deer District against the heat. But again,
it's crummy outside.
Yeah, it was like
April.
Really bad weather. This was just the perfect storm of it's in July, so you've got beautiful weather like we've had really this entire month. So it's going to be great outside. We're on the back end of the pandemic, so people are just dying to do anything, literally anything. Yes, so like going outside and being with 65,000 of your closest other Bucks fans, like that's where I think it just can never be recreated with all the other logistical things that you just talked about, but also like where we were as a society. Like it would be impossible to recreate it. So
and I was gonna say, being outside with 65,000 people was one of the quote safer things you could do, because you were like outside.
We're outside, it's
like,
fine.
And that's what we thought during the pandemic. And obviously, I don't know if we've learned anything from it, but at that moment, that sounded awesome. Like to be outside with Bucks fans sounded like a good idea.
Human interaction,
right? And most of the time now, people will be like, I don't really want to be in a crowd that big. Like, this isn't a good idea. I shouldn't do it.
So let's get to the actual game, Game 6. I had forgotten how bad the basketball was to start the game. First 3 minutes, the Bucks had 3 turnovers, 2 air balls. They were 1 of 5 from the floor. Like that was my count. That's the first note I have here. Is first 3 minutes when they hit the first time out, 3 turnovers, 2 air balls, 1 of 5 from the field.
Yeah, I mean, it was really bad. But in that first stretch, you have the arrival of Giannis in superhuman Giannis that is going to occur when, Mikal Bridges gets out for the layup, and Giannis has this insane chase down block where he starts at half court when Bridges was at the 3-point line, pins it on the glass, and then he goes the other way, gets it back in transition, and he gets his first layup of the game. And it's like, all right, everyone out there is not in a good place. Everyone is shook, like on both sides. This is going to be an ugly game, but there is this man like just flying through the air. And granted, like it wasn't great for really anyone. Like, as you said, that first quarter was really bad. Or at least the first 5 minutes are really bad.
So I stand correct. The first 3 minutes, it was 3 turnovers, 2 air balls, 1 of 5. At 6:51, which was the first media timeout, 8 combined turnovers, and it was a 6-5 score.
Yeah, no, it was really gross. That first 5 minutes was just, you could tell everyone understood the moment, and because they understood the moment, everyone was really tight. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think how bad portions of this game are, and we're going to talk about all of it, but there's a lot of portions of this game that are just really, really gross.
Well, the Bucks then, out of that first media timeout, they start to get something rolling. Drew, who had a very bad game offensively outside of the assist, like shot terribly, had a nice finish. Was this, so Chris Middleton had a dunk in transition.
Yeah.
Was that, I wrote it down, and this is the question I want to ask. Was that the best Chris dunk ever? Because usually I feel like when Chris Middleton gets out in transition, it's a little two-hand, like little dunk. This one, he like brought the ball up, actually elevated, and it was almost like a Statue of Liberty, kind of got past the defender to slam it down in transition, which kicked off a sequence where he scored 7 points in a row for the Bucks.
Frankly, it's the easiest dunk from Chris I can ever remember.
Yeah.
I watched the pick 6 that he gets, and I'm like, just wait, does he lay this up? And all of a sudden he's jumping from further out than you've ever seen him jump before, and he's up higher than you've ever seen it, and it comes down harder than it's ever came down before. And you were like, Chris?
Chris.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go, buddy.
So like you could tell he was like hyped up. Like the adrenaline he had in that game was higher than at any point ever in his career. So yeah, that was, I would say, the easiest Chris Middleton dunk of his career. And then, I mean, after that, it's just tough shot express again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing when you watch this game is Chris, I don't think ends up having a great game. I think he scores 17 points.
Yeah, it's like a fine game. Like he doesn't take a ton of shots, like because Drew is, and obviously Giannis ends up with 50, so he's taking a bunch of shots, gets fouled a bunch. So it's just kind of like a meh Chris Middleton game.
But the thing I end up really enjoying about this game, and it's what I enjoyed about covering that entire thing and covering that entire postseason, was that there was always the guys that had moments, right? Like no matter what, it didn't matter if, they were 4 of 19 from the field, which is what I think Drew ends the night. But like you're going through all of that.
Yes, 4 of 19 from the field.
And even if they were having a bad game, they would have those moments. And it just felt like, all right, the offense isn't really going. We need someone to do it right now. And Chris is like, all right, I'm going to pick six this. I'm going to go get a dunk. And then we're going to get two tough shots that I hit that, like I think it's like a Kobe fade and, another little step back and on like a three where he shoots it from like 2 feet behind the line. And it's like, what? That's just like what it was. And I do think watching this game, you remember the zone that Chris Middleton was in that moment. Like those final couple rounds. And again, it wasn't every single night that he was scoring 40. He only had that one 40-point game and then another 38-point game. But like he would just have those quarters where it was like, okay, we're going with Chris right now. Chris has got this. And that was one of those moments where everything's ugly. It's not perfect. And then Chris just rattles off 7 points. And you're like, okay, like everything's fine. This is going to be okay.
Yeah, and the offense kind of picked up. Again, it started ugly. 6:51 left in the first. It was 6-5. The Bucks win the quarter 29-16. Yep. Giannis finishes with 10 points. He's 4-4 from the free throw line, which is worth noting because he only made 4 free throws in all of Game 5. He was 4 of 11. Like the entire announce crew, because again, Giannis goes 17 of 19 from the free throw line in this game, and Jackson and Van Gundy are just beside themselves the entire time as free throw after free throw goes in for Giannis. But after that first quarter, he was just 4 of 4, 10 points, and you're feeling good, 29-16. But they immediately remind you that in Game 5, the Bucks were down 16 at the end of the first quarter and erased that within 4 minutes. And the start of the second quarter was also very bad for the Bucks. Start of the first quarter was terrible. Start of the second quarter was possibly even worse.
Yeah, I mean, it was so bad to think of like the runs that they give up. Like all of a sudden, campaigns getting loose at the end of the first quarter, and it's just it was such a struggle offensively for the Bucks that entire postseason. And obviously there were moments where it was very good and they scored points very easily. But in the couple of series where it got really close, that 7-gamer against the Nets, and then, in the finals, there's just moments where it was like, have they played basketball before? Like, how could it possibly be this bad? And
because the crazy part is when it's good, they won the title, obviously, right? So, like, the good is championship level good, but the bad was like, what the bleep is going on? They did not score their first field goal of that quarter until 8:27 left in the quarter when Bobby Portis hit a jump.
And honestly, Bobby Portis was huge in that game, too.
Yes.
If we're talking about guys that had good performances, bad performances in that game, I think Portis ends the game with 16. He scores 10 of the Bucks' first 33 points. And he was the one that, like, again, this is why I loved that run so much, was that there were just moments where you got something from someone in that top 7, top 8, where they came through in a moment where you needed them. And it wasn't always the same guy. It wasn't always the same person. It was always just who you needed at that moment. And Portis had it going that night, hit a couple shots, and he kind of got rolling. And without him scoring 10 of those first 33, like, I mean, it could have gotten like pretty ugly. And again, we talked about the big runs in that whole series, but I mean, Portis was huge there for the Bucks just to kind of keep them in it. And I think, you have this terrible second quarter, but the close for the Bucks is just huge, where they end up finding their rhythm a little bit. And I just remember thinking in arena that night, like, the Suns can't let them keep it this close.
Yeah.
Like if the Suns are playing this way in this quarter, it's got to be a double-digit lead at halftime. Because if it's single digits, the Bucks are they're going to do this. And you all of a sudden get to the end of the quarter And oh, look at Giannis. There's a hook shot. There's a little fadeaway jumper. There's, just these couple of plays that just keep it close enough where it had gotten to 7. And there's a couple moments where if it gets one more offense possession for the Suns, it gets to 10, all of a sudden it gets to 12. Like, you could feel it building in that way. And there's just enough plays where it just felt like Giannis was like, no, we're not doing this. Like, I'm going to keep us where we need to be. And it's a lot of shots that, he has struggled with throughout his career. And, he's had good moments where he's been good in the mid range. He's been good at, floaters and jump hooks and stuff like that. But, you're just talking like a 5-point game. And then Giannis is just like, oh, jump hook from 8 feet. Okay. Giannis is like, all right, I'm going to attack, gets kind of bottled up. And then I'm just going to shoot a turnaround jumper. Okay. Yeah, it's good. And everything goes in. And to me, that was just the overwhelming feeling in the arena was that, one, the Bucks can't let this get too far away. And 2, the Suns need to push this thing as far as possible. If the Bucks are going this bad in the second quarter, it's got to be double digits at halftime. And when it wasn't, I just felt like the Bucks knew, like, hey, this thing's in reach. We can go get this.
The Bucks only scored 13 points in that second quarter. So they trailed 47-42 at the half. And I feel it's worth noting because Budenholzer at this point had been criticized for still keeping a lengthy rotation in the postseason. Jeff Teague played in the second quarter, and I think that's it.
That is correct.
So he only went to a 7-man rotation. I mean, he kept it tight. You saw Teague at the beginning, who still had the best line at the end of the night. Felt like I got an A on a group project.
Now he's a legend. He's a podcasting legend. Like, if you're not watching Jeff Teague podcast, you should, because he's a legend.
So I mean, it was a terrible second quarter. Terrible second quarter for the Bucks. Giannis has 17 points at the half at this point. Again, on his way to 50. They're down 47-42. And they just kind of come out fighting right away in that third quarter, trying to erase that 5-point deficit. The second half, as bad as the first half was, I feel like the second half, even for both teams, because the Suns had some moments where they were hitting some tough shots. And the second half ended up being really good basketball.
Yeah, I mean, that third quarter, I think the Bucks win 35-30. And when you're watching all of that, it's funny to, like, think back to, as I said at the end of the second quarter, Giannis is thrown in, like a hook shot, a turnaround jumper. And you're like, all right, this dude's just like not going to let them lose. And that feeling that you felt at the end of the second quarter multiplied exponentially once you get to the third quarter. Because like that, one of the very first shots I think he shoots is like, he's attacking, he gets bottled up. He's not quite sure what to do. It's a turnaround jumper that he gets fouled on, and it is the softest touch Giannis has ever had on any shot. It just bounces, falls through, and you're like, okay, that's going in?
Yeah.
Plus the foul.
And he made the free throw because he made basically every free throw.
Right, he's 17 and 19 from the line that night, so he makes the free throw. Then the next possession, and Giannis loves the crowd building three. Like when the crowd is building and he can hit a three, like he lives for that moment. And obviously a lot of Bucks fans get driven crazy by him shooting those shots. And he took one of those in the first quarter. And it was as they were on their big run, left wing, lines went up, no good. And he hits that one in the third quarter. They're down 4. He hits the 3 to cut it to a 1-point game, I think 49-48. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, like, okay, if he's getting 1 to roll in, he's getting the right wing 3 to go down. Like, this dude is just not going to let them lose. And it's the start of a really special third quarter where he goes for 20 points.
Yeah, so he ended up going for 20 points. But kind of to your point earlier, one of my favorite parts about rewatching this game back was how everyone kind of had their different moments. Chris had the 7 in a row, and Chris, we'll get into that a little bit later, had a really clutch jumper at the end of the game as well. Giannis has the 50 points. Drew has a lot of defensive highlights. He's got a steal in this third quarter, ended up with 4 steals. So even though his offense, his shooting numbers were bad, he still finished with 11 assists. And everybody, so that just leaves Brook. And Brook didn't have, a huge game. It just finished with 10 points on 5 of 10 shooting. But he has this 2-possession stretch where I also wrote down Lopez from Drew, best dunk ever. Because that was also like it was just a beautiful pass where he starts cutting in from the wing and he goes way up with it. I think it was Ayton just kind of tries to swat at it, realizes he's got no chance to get up that high. Like, I don't think I've seen Brook get that high
Right.
and then come down with that type of authority.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
I mean, it's a really fun stretch because I think Brook scores 6 straight points for the Bucks.
Yes.
And it's kind of like where the Bucks are trying to find their way offensively. I think Chris is in an ISO. He gets stuck. He finds Brook, and Brook throws in one of those like little like floating, whatever you want to call it.
But it was kind of a line drive, but it was supposed to be a floater,
right.
but it
all
just
of a sudden,
goes down.
It just goes down, and you're like, all right, like you'll take it, keep the game close, keep the momentum rolling. And then you have this massive dunk where I think it's always been fun to talk about, like to talk to Brook about this, because if you are driving as a Milwaukee Bucks player, you know who's coming down Main Street. It ain't Brook. It is Giannis.
Yep.
Giannis is coming down Main Street, and it is him for a 2-hand slam, whatever it's going to be. And in the moments where Giannis doesn't play, when he's out, whatever it is, all of a sudden, Brook Lopez is going to come back and have a 25-point night, a 30-point night. And everyone's going to be like, oh my God, Brook is back. And when Brook and I talk about it, he's like, people realize, like, I'm just doing the Giannis thing, right? And I was like, I certainly do. Like,
I don't know if
everyone does. So he rarely gets those like rim running opportunities. And it just so happened in transition that he's the one that gets to fill that lane for Drew as he's going baseline looking for a pass. And it just feels like, you know, during that run, there's a couple Brook dunks that really stick out. That is one of them during his 6-point run. And then there's one in the Hawks series where Giannis is out. He's the guy filling the lane, and it was at home at Fiserv Forum, and Drew kind of gets up in the air and he throws an alley-oop to where you would normally throw a Giannis alley-oop.
Yeah.
And Brook comes all the way back and throws it down, and you're like, whoa, okay. But he's so big, and he can put so much force on the rim that his dunks just explode through the rim, and that was one of them. And you're just like, again, this is why I think that run was so special, because I don't know, does Brook even end the night with 10 points? I'd have
10.
Okay, so he ends with 10. But
6
those
in a row,
those 6 in a row, like, help the momentum, help everything that's going on in that third quarter as the Bucks are kind of exchanging punches with the Suns.
So his last floater that he made for his 6 in a row. My only regret in this finals is that we did not get a traditional Mike Breen bang. You know, like there was no big like 3-pointer late in the game, and you just get Mike Breen going bang.
I mean, I think he gives Pat Connaughton one in game 4, I believe, and that was the only.
Was the only one.
That was the only Breen bang of the series.
So we didn't get one in game 6, which is fine, because instead in the third quarter for the Lopez floater, we got my favorite call from Breen of the night. A methodical foray into the paint. Lopez with a methodical foray into. And I've always had this thought anytime Brook starts driving, methodical is the best word to describe it. It is just so precise, and he's just so big that you don't realize he's moving as fast as he is in order to get where he needs to go.
Yeah, I know when he first started to get run off the line, I started to call him glacial blow-bys.
Yeah.
Because, again, it's a glacier moving. So you understand that it's moving very slowly, but somehow you can't stop it. And, yeah, I mean, he had the big dunk, and he's lining up a 3, and Brook lives for those. Like, the trail threes, all right, I got it going. Let it go, and he pump fakes it, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I like this. And then it's one dribble and a big Euro, and the Euro gets stopped, but then all of a sudden he leans back and he just throws one in, and you're like, okay, that's Brook Lopez. And yeah, I mean, again, Brook has that huge stretch where if you're looking at the different things that decide this game, that is one of them. That, you know, Brook, I'm not going to say miraculously, but like it was tough to find a rhythm. Giannis had 50 of the 105 points. So for anybody else on the floor, you had to kind of pick and choose your moments and make the most of them. And that's exactly what Brook did in the middle of that third quarter.
And you also had probably the biggest shot by Drew, hit a shot clock 3 from Giannis at the end of the third quarter. So he still had that shining. And by the way, we talk about all those things, and Giannis had a 20-point third quarter, one of just a handful of NBA players in history who would have 2 20-point quarters in an NBA Finals series. Like again, they run through the list. Michael Jordan's on the list, and like a bunch of other names that are Hall of Famers that you would recognize. So it's insane that he keeps on joining this company, and he has 37 at the end of 3. Bucks fight back. We're tied at 77, heading into quarter number 4, which is a back and forth early. It's back and forth. It includes Bobby Portis in a starring role. Bobby, I just wrote down, Bobby is a psycho.
Yep.
Because Bobby, and in a play that would eventually get overturned, he's in the open floor, and Chris Paul is there, and I don't know, I can't remember who it was that poked it free, and ball goes out of bounds. Initially, we think it's Bucks ball. They end up going to break. Call gets overturned. Whatever. But there's a little brouhaha that breaks out because Bobby decides to stand between Chris Paul and stop him from trying to talk to the official. And the entire time, he has this grin on his face because he knows that he's a tough guy. Bobby's an actual tough guy.
That's right.
And Chris Paul is a fake tough guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just the entire time, he's like, what do you, he just has this smile on a face like, okay, Chris, you can get pissed off at me. Cool. What are you actually going to do about it?
I mean, there's just so much Bobby content in that fourth quarter.
So much.
There's so much of it. So let's knock it all out. So you start with that.
Yep.
And you're thinking like, okay, Bobby's having quite a bit of fun. Like this is pretty good. He's just smiling at Chris Paul and egging him on. And then all of a sudden, you keep having Bobby moments. One, he makes a bunch more plays.
Yep.
He ends up hitting a bunch of big buckets where he gets the ball in the right corner where he always gets it. He loves that 3-point shot. And the Suns run at him as though he is the best shooter in the league. And to be fair, during this run, he was one of the best shooters in the league. He's shooting 40+% from the 3-point line. Like he's
for the season, I think he finished third in 3-point percentage.
So like it was earned, but again, it was. And during this run, again, this is what I'm talking about. Guys have their moments. And guys have their things. During that run, you always felt confident when Bobby pump faked, and now he's tried to turn it into like a sidestep 3. But back in those days, 2 years ago, it was a pump fake, one dribble, and he shoots like a floating kind of jump push shot from like 18 feet. No one in the world has been taught that.
No.
Ever.
Nope.
This is literally just a Bobby Portis thing, and he hits 2 of those during that run. And all of a sudden, it's Bobby kind of helping them through and doing all of it. So you have him talking junk to Chris Paul. You have him hitting shots. And then you fast forward a little bit further, and you have him
Bobby tech.
You end up having a tech where, he ends up trying to, what was it, a strip on.
So it was on Jay Crowder. He was defending Jay Crowder, and he kind of reached in a little bit, but and Jay was trying to like jab back out. So like Jay had started the drive. Bobby had kind of denied him. So like Jay just trips. He just slips and falls. But the official, I don't know if he thought maybe the contact initially from the initial, stop, or if like their feet got tangled up, ends up calling a foul on Bobby Portis.
And Bobby sprints to the end.
High steps.
Like
he's Deion Sanders to the from half court all the way to the baseline.
And to be fair, if you're watching the officials, you can tell over on the sideline, he sees Bobby get to half court, and you can tell he's not happy about it, but he's like, you know what?
It's the finals.
Missed it.
I'm not
That's
gonna
fine.
do it.
And then he keeps going.
Yeah,
and it's like, Bobby, I
know what you want me to do.
I got to give you one of these. And he does. And you get this beautiful moment where he comes back down the floor, and Chris Middleton looks him straight in the eyes and says, you need to calm down. And it's like, oh, okay, Chris has got this. Like, if you were concerned, Chris Middleton has this situation under control, because when they really had Bobby Portis going, and what helped Bobby become a legend is the intensity that he brings, the jolt that he brings, but you need to harness it. You can't let it go too far. And in that moment, you could tell, like, Chris knew, like, all right, let's bring it back down. Let's kind of handle this. But again, you have a massive Bobby stretch. And it was huge, because if you look at the start of that fourth quarter, like, they're going back and forth, and it's almost unfathomable to think about some of the mistakes the Bucks make in this game. Like, it's tied at 79. Chris Middleton's bringing the ball up the floor, And Drew Holiday, I don't know what Drew is doing.
Nope.
I don't have the slightest idea. He's, I don't know, directing someone somewhere, and Chris is into his pick and roll, and he sees the help defender come, so he whips it no look over to Drew,
who's not looking,
and Drew's just not looking. The ball goes out of bounds, and Chris like owns it, but then like looks at Drew and is just like,
wait, what just happened? What were you doing?
What were you doing?
Exactly would you say you were doing over there?
And what is a perfect encapsulation of Drew Holiday? The very next possession, Drew Holiday dribbles down the floor, doesn't pass to anyone, right down the right wing, pull up three, bang, and the Bucks go up three, and you're just like, okay, that's like that was the Drew Holiday experience for pretty much that entire playoff run, where it was just like he would make a mistake that was so mind-boggling and so difficult to comprehend, and followed it up with the most badass play possible. Like, all right, we're struggling. We're getting Giannis this break. What do we need? Okay, pull up three. Bang.
Bang.
I got it. And that was the roller coaster that you're on with Drew Holiday, because, I mean, he was unbelievable defensively. Like, that series is what convinced me I needed to write a story about the Drew.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the move that he makes where...
I mean, he did it in the third quarter. He had one of those steals.
Correct. He pulls off a Drew on Devin Booker, and you can tell Devin Booker is like, how did that just happen? And for those that don't know, I wrote a story with Drew Holiday at The Athletic where we're breaking down what he does defensively, and he's the only person in the league that can pull off this move. Defensively, he will chest up a driver, and then as you drive at them with his inside hand, he will strip at the ball, and he'll just go the other way. And you as a driver are putting your shoulder down. You think you're going to move him. You think you're going to get him out of the way. And he just doesn't go anywhere. And then all of a sudden he has the ball and he's going the other way. And you can't really comprehend how it happens. And this series was a series that inspired me to spend the entire next season talking to coaches and players about what makes Drew Holiday so good defensively. And it was those specific steals, because Devin Booker is, and one thing watching this last night that I really ended up thinking about a lot was how physical Devin Booker is. Like,
oh yeah,
he to his credit, like, I know he's supposed to be a finesse player, he's a jump shooter, but like, I mean, he's moving Bobby Portis, he's moving like
he
anyone.
Moved Giannis at one point.
Like, he can get his shoulders into people, and then he steps back and he gets to where he wants. And it was just so kind of crazy to see how good he was then. He's gotten even better now, but how good he was then, and how, I'm not going to say easily, because it's not an easy job, but how easy Drew Holiday made it look to bottle up Devin Booker.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's clearly not an easy job. And Booker was just infuriated throughout that series, dealing with Drew, dealing with PJ Tucker, and just having to deal with like the physicality that the Bucks could kind of match with him the whole way. And that just really stood out to me was, Drew Holiday, insane turnover, big three, and just this defense throughout the entire game, throughout the entire fourth quarter, that just had those guys infuriated.
I also want to give a shout out late fourth quarter. Bud taking a use it or lose it timeout.
It's given.
R.I.P. Pouring out for the use it or lose it. We don't know what it's going to be like.
Yeah,
we're going to have to use it or lose it going forward.
That's a great question.
So it was just a little something. If you follow Eric on Twitter, he keeps track of the use it or lose it and even did a story at The Athletic about the use it or lose it with Mike Budenholzer. So don't know if Adrian Griffin's going to be a use it or lose it guy.
That's a great question. We really don't. We don't.
So pouring out for the use it or lose it. I had to take note of that, and that's when after that. Little before the 3-minute mark, then Giannis starts to take over again. Gets a bucket to push it to 98-90. Gets a bucket, which gave him 49 to get up to 192. And you start thinking, okay, maybe this is going to happen. Maybe they're actually going to do Bucks in 6. And there's no way that the national announcing crew had any idea what Bucks in 6 was.
No.
That the crowd constantly chanting Bucks in 6 during this game.
Right.
Like, for them, it's probably like, oh.
They think they're going to win.
Yeah, they think they're going to win. Right. But I remember walking into the Bradley Center before a playoff game and chanting Bucks in 6. It was game 6 of a series the Bucks would ultimately lose in 7. Yep. So the Bucks were down 3-2 walking into the building that night.
Right.
And it was like an 8:30 tip Friday night. So the crowd's gassed up, and we're all chanting Bucks in 6 as we walk in. As Brandon Jennings says, it's for the culture. So like, there's no way they have any idea
Yeah.
what Bucks in 6 means, but it looks like it could potentially come to fruition. However, things got a little closer. I think it was Bobby had an open 3 in the corner.
Yep.
That would have put it away.
Yep.
Would have
They
been,
were up 6.
no, so it was 192.
Oh, yeah. No, so go to the
if he makes it, it's 103.92. You're up 11, and you're feeling great. Misses, ends up getting a Booker transition. So now you think you're going up 11 to Booker making it. All of a sudden, it's a 6-point game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think with 114 left, they cut it all the way down to 4.
Yeah,
and
they cut it to 196,
and they cut it down to 4. I think the possession before, you could tell everyone kind of leaned on Chris in these moments because that's what they had done the entire postseason. That hey, Chris, do your thing. We trust you in this moment, and it's a Chris ISO, and he kind of gets to his spot, and then at the last second, I think he sees Bobby or Brooke cutting, and he tries to like throw a little pass like around and just chucks it out of bounds. And the announce crew is just like, you can tell he doesn't have the legs. Like he just like wasn't in a position where, his body and him physically was ready to like take a shot.
So it was 194 when Chris had that turnover. Jay Crowder gets free throws on the other end, which, by the way, if the Bucks this year get this version of Jay Crowder,
that'd be helpful.
Like, sign me up. I'm just saying, sign me
solid.
up. Like, it was a pleasure watching, again, knowing the outcome. At the time, it wasn't a pleasure. Now, knowing the outcome and knowing that Jay Crowder is a member of the Milwaukee Bucks, watching Jay Crowder play in this game was delightful.
Yeah.
And I hope they get this version of Jay Crowder in this upcoming season. So Crowder hits 2 free throws to cut it to 196, and then they decide to go right back to Chris. And kind of they come out of a timeout and actually kind of run a play. They get some motion going where he takes a handoff to try to get to a spot on that right side.
Yeah, and I mean, it was so interesting to watch this team figure out how they wanted to operate in clutch time. And they did essentially the exact same thing for the entire postseason. They found it at the end of that season where Drew Holiday brings the ball up the floor. He's going to have it. Chris is going to be around the free throw line. He's going to have an option to go to the left or the right off of a screen from Giannis. He's going to catch the ball. And then from there, they can do whatever they want. If they want to do a dribble, if he wants to enter it to Giannis, they can do a dribble handoff. If they want to run pick and roll, they can do that. If he is getting overplayed, he can swing it back to Drew, and then Drew can drive. And the whole idea is, like you have like a triangle of those 3 guys in the middle of the floor with the other 2 players spread out in different places, probably going to crash the glass once those 3 decide what they want to do. And it was just, I don't know, I thought it was just kind of amazing for them to, one, figure it out, and then you have a play with so much optionality that in whatever moment you could lean on the person that you wanted to. And in that moment, there's one guy on the floor, 1 bucket away from 50 in a finals closeout game.
He's got 49.
And of course, Chris Middleton, boom, Giannis at the free throw line. Take us home, big fella. You've done it the whole night. Go do the thing. And Giannis, again, and this is what I wrote at the time. This is what I tweeted at the time. This is all I could think about was, if I have 49 in a closeout game, I am not passing to anyone. There's no way. Everything is for me. I'm taking us home. I'm finishing this game. And I just thought it was just a beautiful moment that, these 2 guys that at the start of their careers were fighting each other for playing time. Giannis dropping F-bombs about Chris when I ask him about it to this day. Like, I hated that dude. I wanted his playing time. He wanted my playing time. I had scratches on my arms that I was showing my parents when I would go to our apartment. Like, this guy, Chris Middleton, did this to me. Like, to go from that all those years ago in their first year together to this moment in an NBA Finals where Giannis is having a historic game, a historic performance, one that very few will ever match. And in that moment, Giannis still decides, Chris is taking us home. Like, this is what Chris has done throughout the postseason. It doesn't necessarily matter that he's had a bad game. I think he started 4 of 11. In the fourth quarter, they came back from a timeout and he hit like a Kobe fade to go to 5 for 12. Like, Chris, again, it wasn't a great Chris game, but in that moment, Giannis knew, like, this is what we do. This is how we've been winning. And I don't care if Chris just turned it over. Like, I'm going to give Chris the ball and he's going to hit this shot. And the shot that Chris ends up hitting in that moment, like if you were worried if he didn't have the legs
on the previous shot,
he took a shot that you thought there was no chance he had the legs because he didn't get really into Devin Booker off the handoff. He doesn't really like push his way towards the free throw line. He just catches it, takes a dribble like out away from the floor or out away from the elbow, pushes himself out this way, fades, and you're like, there's no way he has the legs for that. There's no possible way he could, and just bottoms, and it's a wrap. Game's over. Chris Middleton finishes it, and I just to this day, I just think it's a perfect moment to tell the story of those two guys together, to tell the story of Giannis as a superstar and like the trust that he has had in these people, in this city, in this team, like all of that. To me, it is still just a perfect moment that occurred on a basketball court that really just brings all of this together for anyone that followed this team along the way, that has been a fan for all these years. Like to have that moment, I just think, I don't know if you can write something better than it.
Yeah. So I always thought of that kind of like being the end, like, here we go. Devin Booker got a really good look on the next possession from three. Like they designed a really great play. And like, oh, I don't remember him being just wide open on the right wing for three. He missed it, so the Bucks are able to hit free throws and close it out at the end. Giannis gets fouled later in the game. I don't know if the Suns are just like, hey, here you go, make one of these and get 50, because it just didn't make sense to foul at that point.
I mean, Pat missed 2 free throws.
He did.
Pat missed 2 free throws to keep. Honestly, I don't think Giannis gets fouled if Pat makes
both of those.
If he makes one even, they might not. But instead, I think it's still 6 late, and you get Giannis with the ball in his hands with the chance to go to the line. And I still enjoy, because everyone knew what was going on.
Correct.
And like Giannis had already done the like.
Yeah, he had celebrated. He had done the jumping celebration with PJ Tucker, who we have not talked about 42 minutes into this thing, which we definitely still need to get into at some point. But like, yeah, Giannis had like, I don't want to say mentally checked out of the game, but like mentally he was already there. Like we won the title.
We won this thing. And I just enjoy him going to the free throw line. And if you look towards the bench, you can see Dante DiVincenzo on his little wheelie scooter. And he's trying to figure out how to do this the right way.
So like the camera shows
he isn't
50.
sure like if it's like which hand he's got to do to make sure the camera gets the 50. And it's before Giannis shoots a free throw. Yeah. So it's before he shoots the first one. And Dante's like talking through it with Bryn Forbes, like strategizing, like, okay, how do I make sure the camera gets a 5-0 and not a 0-5? And you can just, the whole bench is just like reveling in the fact that Giannis has a chance at 50, hits the free throw, and then he misses the second one. And honestly, maybe Giannis would want 51 because it's more. I think it's pretty perfect.
It's pretty perfect to have 50 because you have. So again, they win 105-98. My ultimate takeaways from this game: going into the playoffs, Giannis can't be a closer.
Yeah,
like there were legitimate talks, like, oh, maybe he's more of a Robin. Maybe he can't be, the best player on a team and win a championship. Right. And he closes out with 50 in a game 6. Chris Middleton's not good enough to be a number 2. Now, again, this wasn't a great Chris Middleton game by any stretch of the imagination. We went through his 7 straight earlier in the game, hit the clutch jumper late, but he had 40 in a pretty important game 4, had 38 in a pretty important moment in the Eastern Conference Finals, showed that he could be that guy. And then the crazy part to me is they did this with a guy who had zero interest in playing offense. Like he was just there. Like now, like everybody's like, oh, whoever the Bucks sign, like any free agent they bring in, any trade that they make, any draft, a guy that they draft, oh, can he shoot? Because you got to surround Giannis with shooters. They all got to be shooters. I mean, I don't know. I think PJ Tucker took a shot or two. I don't know how. I mean, I don't think he made anything. I don't think he scored any points in the game.
Yeah, PJ Tucker scoreless.
1
for 1.
He took a corner 3. Yep. I want to say in the first half, where he's just like, "All right, fine. You're not going to guard me. We'll see if this goes in."
Yep.
Didn't go in. But they did this with PJ Tucker in the starting lineup because of the attitude and everything that he possessed. So again, I think PJ's a pretty special player. in terms of the attitude that helped change the Bucks
Sure.
in order to get them to this point where they could win a championship. But maybe you don't need 4 other shooters on the floor to surround Giannis with to still find success.
Yeah, I mean, I think throughout that you have Pat Connaughton as a role player,
Yep.
and you have PJ Tucker as a role player. And Pat hit some massive shots against the Nets. Had a big 3 in Game 4. I mentioned the Breen bang. Like he did all that, but in Game 6, he was 0 for 4 from the field. But if you look at both those guys, the identity that the Bucks found during that postseason run was, all right, we got 3 dudes that are real good on offense. We really trust them. Okay, you know what? We have 2 dudes that are real good on offense because Drew's going to be
maybe
doing his thing defensively, so he's not going to be great. So we have 2 guys that we really trust on offense. Maybe 3 if you count Brook. But everybody else, just get to the offensive glass. Make it absolute hell on anyone defending us. And I think overwhelmingly, you know, we were talking about a couple of the different shots. I think Drew ends up hitting 2 threes in that game. He has the one that he dribbles up into in the fourth quarter. The one in the third quarter that he hits.
Shot clock 3.
Shot clock 3 that came off a reload on a Pat Connaughton offensive rebound. And I believe there's another 3 that they hit where, again, they didn't hit a lot of threes that game. It was pretty rough. 6 of like 27, 37. Yeah, 6 of 27 from the three-point line in that game. It wasn't great, but they just had those possessions where they just keep it alive. And that's
why there was no Mike Breen bang.
Right.
Really, it's 6 of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. But you just have those guys. And PJ was just so essential to that idea that, you know what? I don't know if we're going to be the best offensive team, but I know it's going to be hell to cover us because we're going to beat the crap out of you on the offensive glass. And if you watch this series, if you watch that game, just watch Brook Lopez and PJ Tucker on offense. They don't touch the ball a lot, but as soon as shots go up, both those guys are going straight to the rim. And I mean, you can just tell how hard it is to box all of them out. Like, to end I think the final bucket of the first quarter is a Brook Lopez crash the offensive glass, just a little lay-in where you look at who was out on the floor. The Bucks were playing 3 bigs at the time. It's Brook, it's Bobby, and it's Giannis. And I think Giannis might have taken the last shot, or maybe Chris or Drew, but it's a left wing jumper, missed, and then all of a sudden it's like Campaign and like Mikal Bridges trying to box out Brook, and Brook's just like, all right, well, I'm going to take this layup. This
free bucket.
Thank you. But to me, it's just this wonderful thing where they found their way, and I think that's always the thing that, as we talk about the next iteration of a Bucks championship team, obviously that's what they're pushing for every year, is you can think your identity is one thing, but the playoffs are going to reveal what it actually is. Like, the Bucks had Dante DiVincenzo starting at the start of that playoff run. So it was ball movement and Dante just moving around, creating chaos on offense, keeping the ball going, doing all this stuff. And then he gets hurt, and you got to figure out a way to survive. And all right, now it's PJ Tucker uglying it up. Let's do it. Let's embrace
play some
it.
Ugly basketball.
Let's embrace it, and like, let's find our way. And I do think, you know, that's always going to be, you know, kind of how all this stuff goes, like where you just find your identity along the way, and you can try to plan it. You can try to make it pretty. You can do everything that you want, but eventually, you know, push comes to shove, and either you do the thing that you need to do to win, or you don't, and you lose, and you wonder why we weren't able to do it. And I think that's going to be kind of the lasting legacy of that team, is that it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. It wasn't how you thought you were going to win, but you won because you have a bunch of dudes that, when push came to shove, they figured out how to get it done.
If people really want to immerse in what this day is, the second anniversary of the Bucks winning this championship, what are some good pieces that they should go back and read if they're subscribers on The Athletic, or should become subscribers to The Athletic so they can go read?
Yeah, I mean, we have the very first story that goes out that talks about a historic Giannis performance, I think 3 minutes after the buzzer sounded. So that's a good one. We talk through the entire championship. Me and Sam Amick co-wrote a story, which is, to me, our goal was to, you know, summarize the entire thing. And to me, there's just like a number of wonderful moments in there, and there's just like, you forget that going into Game 6, Thanasis got COVID.
Oh,
The day of Game 5.
so
The day of Game 5, Thanasis gets COVID. And all of a sudden, for the next 3 or 4 days, the only thing that matters is, does anybody else on the team have it?
mhm.
Does anybody else on the team have it?
And specifically, I don't know, somebody who might be hanging out with Thanasis, might be close with Thanasis.
That hugs and talks to Thanasis all the time, that only surrounds himself with Thanasis. And I mean, that's kind of the situation that you're thinking about. And I think you just have all of these kind of unbelievable moments. Like, so Game 5 happens, Bucks win. Obviously, you have the steal, you have the alley-oop, you do all of that. And then after the game, Giannis comes up on the podium, says, I can't do this, goes off the podium, disappears for 30 minutes, comes back onto the podium and does his post-game presser. And all of us are like, what just happened? How could he not do what?
Yeah.
What just occurred? And you come to find out, as Sam Amick and I he got an IV this year as he was working his way back, because as Giannis has told us many times before, getting back on the floor is not icing whatever you're doing and relaxing. It is working as hard as humanly possible to get the swelling out of it, to get your body into a position where you can get there. And like the absolute insanity of those 3 days of, Thanasis getting COVID, everyone trying to figure out, are the tests going to come back clean? Are we all of a sudden on the final test before the game starts, are we going to hear Bobby Portis is out, or Pat Connaughton is out, or Giannis is out, or Drew is out, or Chris is out, because someone on the team tested positive for COVID. And he happens to be the guy that runs up and down the sidelines, hugs everyone all the time. Like,
very, very interactive.
Very interactive. He's around people all the time. That is the chaos that you have around the team getting into it. And like that, to me, our story about that whole journey, that series, is to me the one that you should read, because you have Mike Budenholzer walking out of the Milwaukee Public Market, out of St. Paul's Fish Market, with a lobster roll, and saying hi to reporters across the street as he walks back to his place with a lobster roll the night before Game 6. Like, you just have all of these things where it's like, one, how did we ever live this life?
Yeah.
Like, this was what life was actually like. And then two, how did we all live that life and the Bucks won a championship?
Quickly on Thanasis, just because I watched enough of the post celebration as well. And there was confusion because, they're trying to get Adam Silver up there or whatever, and they cut to this, and they stayed on it for a while, where you can see someone's holding a phone in front of Giannis, and he's just like really excited. Right. And knowing what we know now, that was him FaceTiming Thanasis, telling him, you got to get here. Right. You got to get here right now. As that kind of came out later, that was fantastic. And again, any post reaction, you have the great one-on-one that you got with Giannis after the parade as well, which was 2 days after this Game 6. So plenty of things if you want to fully immerse into what this day is and celebrate the Bucks for the championship that I, as a Bucks fan, literally thought never was coming.
Yeah.
Literally thought never was coming. I thought the closest they would get was Game 6, or it was 2019. I walked out of the building in 2019 after Game 2, attended it as a fan.
Ooh, that's a good one.
They blew the doors off of the Raptors. And I thought, Raptors have zero answers for Giannis. Like, the Bucks are going to the finals. I can't believe this. And then the Bucks lose 4 in a row. Yep. Everything happens that happened in the bubble. Then even on this journey of, you had to go to 7 against the Nets. Giannis gets hurt against the Hawks. Yep. Like, it was step after step that they had to take in order to get here. So I am going to fully immerse in this day because as a Bucks fan, I never thought that we would be celebrating a championship. Because again, like, I think of like the I'm blanking on his name. Like some of the big free agents that they brought in the early 2000s, like the Mo Williams era, the Bobby Simmons era, like the just real bad Bucks teams. And here we are celebrating a championship. So Eric, thank you so much for jumping on. I was planning on this being like maybe a half hour, and here we are like 55 minutes in. So you don't have to apologize to me. Like, I feel like I have to apologize to you for keeping you this long. Fine. But I hope everybody enjoys it. Maybe we'll do again another one of these some other day. But more Repackables are going to be coming out throughout the course of the summer. But we thought we would take a pause from the Packers and celebrate the Bucks today on the 2-year anniversary. So thanks for following along right here on